Good evening. I call to order this regular meeting of the Minnehaha County Planning and Zoning. I'll begin with a few introductory comments. As a courtesy to everyone here tonight, please make sure that all cell phones are turned off. Please note that tonight's Planning Commission meeting will be rebroadcast via CityLink and posted on www.minnehahacounty.org site for viewing by the general public. Any final action taken on the conditional use permit applications tonight will take effect 5 working days following this meeting unless a written appeal of the Planning Commission's decision is filed in the Planning Office by Monday, August 1st at 5 p.m. In the event of an appeal, the decision will be referred to the County Commission for a hearing on Tuesday, August 16th at or after 9 a.m. The affected parties will be notified of the meeting date, and meetings of the County Commission are held in the same room. First on the agenda is public input. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda? At this time, the Planning Commission will consider the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are perceived to be non-controversial and meet all of the requirements of the codes and regulations. The consent agenda will be acted on in one motion with no public hearing on the items unless a member of the public, the commission, or staff requests the item be removed from the consent agenda. The minutes from the June 27th meeting are included in the consent agenda. Does any Planning Commission member wish to have an item removed for discussion? Next, I'll read each item on the consent agenda and ask if there are any issues or comments from the staff or the audience. If any member of the staff or the audience would like to be heard on an item, please raise your hand, and that item will be removed to the regular agenda to allow you to address the commission later in the meeting. Any items remaining at the consent agenda will be approved by the Planning Commission with the conditions recommended by staff. Item number 1 is the approval of the minutes of the June 27th, 2022 meeting. Item number 2 is conditional use permit 22-54 to allow a solid waste facility for the seasonal stockpiling of municipal biosolids on the property legally described as the west half, the northeast quarter, and the east half, the northwest quarter, section 12, township 102 north, range 49 west. That is a Mapleton Township. The petitioner and landowner is the city of Sioux Falls. That is located approximately 3 miles north of Sioux Falls. Okay.
Chairman, the township would like to have that moved to the regular agenda, please.
Okay. We'll do so. Item number 3 is conditional use permit 22-55 to exceed 2,400 square feet of accessory building space, requesting 6,220 square feet on the property legally described at the south 1,430.98 feet, the north 288.99 square feet, the west 321.81 square feet, southwest quarter, section 25, township 102 north, range 48 west. That is in Brandon Township. The petitioner and landowner is Spencer Schrenk, location 920 North Chestnut Boulevard. Item number 4 is conditional use permit 22-56 to exceed 2,400 square feet of accessory building space, requesting 4,752 square feet on the property legally described as Tract 1, Romans Edition, Northeast Quarter, Northwest Quarter, and Lot 1, Langdon's 3rd subdivision, all in Section 34, Township 103 North, Range 49 West. Sverdrup Township. Petitioner is Morton Buildings. Landowner is Neil Brown. That is located at 47527 255th Street. Item number 5 is conditional use permit 22-57 to transfer and make available 5 building eligibilities from the south half, the northeast quarter, there's an exception of RY, and the southeast quarter, northwest quarter, and the northeast quarter, southwest quarter. There's another exception of the east 2 roads, the south 5 roads, and except the south 99 feet, end of exception, and the north half, southeast quarter, another exception, the right-of-way, end of exception, and the east 2 roads, south 5 roads, northeast quarter, southwest quarter, and the east 2 roads, southeast quarter, southwest quarter, to the northeast quarter, the southeast quarter, all in Section 2, Township 102 North, Range 48 West, that is in Brandon Township. Petitioner is Marvin Manifold. He's also the landowner. That is located 3 miles north of Brandon. All right. Okay, the consent agenda, item number 2 and item number 5 has been asked to be moved to the regular agenda. I'll entertain a motion for the other item number 1, 3, and 4.
I'll make a motion, Madam Chair, to approve the items 1, 3, and 4 on the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve those 3 items. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. If your item has been approved, you're free to go. Item number 2, Kevin?
Good evening. I am Kevin Hookman from the County Planning Department. Item number 2, as you read earlier, is to allow a solid waste facility for the seasonal stockpiling of municipal biosolids on the property. The petitioner is the city of Sioux Falls. Just to note that if this CUP is approved, it will have to become approved as a solid waste permit through our office, which then goes to the county commission. The Planning Commission should also be aware that this item was brought to the attention of the planning staff by Mapleton Township Supervisor, who noticed significant truck traffic on the roads and wanted to ensure that the use was being permitted properly. The petitioner has submitted a detailed site plan, narrative, and approval letter from the State Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources. The site plan shows where biosolids will be stored in the yellow area. It also shows that there's going to be a berm on the west side of the storage area to hold and prevent water runoff. And then it shows the driveway located to access the property off of 257th Street. The driveway is shown to be 225 feet long. Staff visited the site for a review. Most of the parcel is planted with corn, and the driveway is already started with some rough gravel along the beginning part of the driveway near the road. The proposed storage area is already clear of crops, and the berm is already in place along the large existing tree grove. The nearest dwellings on the site are approximately a quarter mile away. There's a dwelling to the northeast. You have it circled in blue there on that site map. And then there's a farmstead with 2 dwellings on it, approximately a quarter mile to the northwest of the site. Also, you see the couple rings in the northwest corner of that site map. Then there is a unoccupied farm adjacent to the site, the proposed site. The end use of the biosolids will be used for agricultural fertilizer. Close proximity to fertilizer will help the ag producers. I'll go over, let's see here, that the effect upon the use of the enjoyment of the property in the surrounding area for uses already permitted upon the property values in the surrounding area. The site is mostly ag in this area. As I described, that they have the houses about a quarter mile away. And I also noted as described that the end use is going to be for ag purposes. So this does fit in the ag zoning district. Then the future growth of the area would be criteria 2. Again, most of it's agriculture and would likely continue to be agriculture. There is a possibility of new residential development in the area, but it's not likely to develop close to the site because the city already owns much of the land nearby because it owns this whole 160 acres, plus it owns land north of the site. In addition, the Slip Up Creek floodplain exists to the west of the site, which would prevent too much development encroaching into the floodplain. The criteria 3, that utilities, access roads, drainage, and other necessary facilities are provided. As I noted earlier, the extra truck traffic that this township noticed, the petitioner explains in the narrative that approximately 4,000 tons of biosolids will be stored on the site. So this would be a lot of extra truck traffic to and from the site. Staff spoke with Don Oschlager from Mapleton Township about this. And he stated a road maintenance agreement should be required as part of the approval, and county staff agrees that a road maintenance agreement or road haul agreement should be required as part of approval. Number 4, the off-street parking and loading requirements are met. The site is large enough to meet these requirements. Number 5, the measures are taken to control offensive odors, fumes, dust, noise, vibration, and lighting, inclusive of lighted signs, so that none of these will constitute a nuisance. The narrative does include an explanation of biosolids to be as dewatered and stockpiled as a Class B biosolid. And the narrative continues that this is to be safe for agricultural purpose and does not attract disease or insects or rodents. The narrative includes that the operation will take place on weekdays between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m., so there will not be nighttime operations or weekend operations to disturb neighbors. Number 6, criteria 6, the health, safety, general welfare of the public and the comprehensive plan. The proposed biosolid storage area has already been reviewed and approved by the state of South Dakota Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources. The storage area will provide an alternative supply of fertilizer for area producers. In addition, describes this use in an alternative, bringing the biosolids to the landfill, which would be an alternative. Staff is recommending approval with 8 conditions. I'm sure that the city representatives will be here to answer any kind of detailed questions about the product. I'll show you a few photos of the site. There's the entrance to the driveway. You can see the coarse gravel already installed. And there's the large storage area there. It's cleared of crops. It's kind of hard to see because everything's either green or brown, but you can see a ridge in the back there where the berm is located, where the plants kind of raise up off the ground a little bit there. This would be looking to the northeast, to the nearest farmstead there, and then this would be looking towards, my arrow is a little off, this would be the northwest to the nearest farmstead there. So I will go back to the site plan. And yes, I will be available for any questions, and I'm sure there'll be lots of technical questions that would be better answered by city staff.
Any questions for him?
Kevin, so was this in operation before, has it already been in operation?
That is my understanding, is it was in operation last year, and I got a call because trucks started coming. And it already has been approved by the state. I think it was a couple of years ago the permit was given.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Doug?
Yeah, Kevin, my biggest concern is what is their haul route? Are they going to go up 75 and then across, or are they going to go on, I can't remember what the road it is right now, but then go up the Arrows Road and then come back? So it'd be less less trucks on gravel road versus a mile and a half or 2.5 miles on gravel?
Sure, that would have to be addressed in the haul road agreement. I would assume it's gonna be the less gravel, because there is a, county highway, the Arrows Road, a little bit further than a half mile to the east of this site. And that would probably be the best place to come in and out of. There's also a bridge just to the west of this site that would have to be considered, for any sort of, load requirements on the bridge.
Anyone else? Is the petitioner here? Come forward and state your name and address, please.
Thanks for having us. I'm Mark Perry with the City of Sioux Falls. I'm the wastewater superintendent out at the water reclamation facility. I also have Mark Hierholzer here. He's our operations manager. And Phil Greenwood is our biosolids supervisor in charge of the program. I guess what we originally came here and thought this was going to be just a consent agenda item, and because it was recommended for approval by the planning team, and I think just to add a few more things to what Kevin had presented would be that the city's been doing this since the 1980s. We've been providing free fertilizer with the biosolids to the farmers of Minnehaha County for almost 40 years. We are currently going through some process changes at the plant, and we originally had that as a liquid application, and now we're moving towards a biosolids cake application. With the liquids application, we ran 4 to 5 probably times the amount of vehicles out to the farm fields in the county. We have since changed that so that we can, reduce costs like any business would do, and we're moving towards a cake operation, so to make our system more efficient. And so by doing this, we're setting up a temporary site that's been approved by the state of South Dakota DANR, who gets their regulations from EPA, and they're just following through with the proper approvals for biosolids application out onto those fields. And so we've taken that liquid process and turned it into a cake process, and we've reduced the number of loads that we're going to take out to the fields. But in the interim, we had a need for this temporary site, and we need that because in the interim we don't have the space to supply and put that where we're processing those cake solids. And so and throughout the year, the farm fields fill up with crops, and so we don't have a place to put those, so we have to store that material for a while until the crops get off the fields, and then we apply it. So that's why we're requesting the use of that temporary site. And over the time frame, it would be our hope and our long-range goal to have enough storage elsewhere, because this actually takes us and we truck it out to that site, and we try to place it there so that it could be distributed out to the farm fields that we have centrally located around that, so it's more efficient. But it would actually be more efficient for us to keep it and just haul it once. So in the future, I see that at some point in time we may not even be utilizing the site, but for now we need to. Otherwise, we don't have a place to put them. And I should just point out, and I'll see if Mark and Phil have anything else to add to that, but The sites, and Kevin alluded to this, the site's been approved by the South Dakota DENR for a storage site. We've taken the runoff control measures. There was a berm in the background that you saw. Some of you had questions about the minimum travel route. We would be coming off that one highway off to the east, I believe, and then turning into the west, and then we would leave back that same direction. So it would just be basically, is it about like a half a mile or something like that?
A little over a quarter of a mile.
A quarter mile then. And then, and another thing to point out is the material's been treated and gone through a biological process to break that down. And I think Kevin alluded to some of that about our product. Do you have some other things to add, Mark?
Yeah, what I would like to add is that we are highly regulated by the federal government, the EPA, and the Department of Agricultural and Natural Resources on how this stuff has to be stabilized. We do very extensive testing on the biosolids as it's going through the stabilization process. These tests are done every day. They're both biological tests and chemistry tests to certify that they are safe for application and compliance with EPA standards for Class B biosolids. So we do take our responsibilities both to the environment, to the farmers, and to the community very seriously. So we know ahead of time if we're going to have an issue with these biosolids, and we remediate those issues immediately before it would even have a chance to leave the plant. So we feel very confident standing before you that this is a very safe, beneficial product for the community, for the county, and for the farmers, particularly in consideration with the escalating cost of fertilizer. This is a free benefit for many farmers that we are giving to them. So it would benefit both us as a city, as Mark alluded to. We're a little cramped for storage on the plant. We're looking to fix that, but as you know, capital projects are extremely expensive. So we have to pace these capital projects out, but we do have them in place and in planning stages to get our long-term storage on the plant site. This is probably just, we're not exactly sure how many years, but we do see it as kind of a short-term horizon for this facility.
I have no comments. You guys have covered it.
And one other thing that I should add is that last week, our Public Works Director, Mark Cotter, spoke with Don about the road hauling agreement, I believe is what it's called. And basically worked out an agreement with him over the phone and typed that up on an email back to Don. And so that should be fairly well set, and if I understand the road hauling agreements, so that should be straightforward. And that was one of the requests from the items here listed in the recommendations from the planning team here. So I think, do you guys have any questions for us?
Jeff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, fellows, how long have you been using this location?
So, you can go ahead.
We used this site last year. We got state approval, I believe, in April of 2021 to use this site. We did not realize that this product would fall under the solid waste regulations through the county. Once it was brought to our attention, we did act immediately.
So it's just 2 years?
1 year for sure. We began the preparations on the site for this year, had a load hauled out there, and then the notification came to us that we need to get a conditional use permit and a solid waste permit. So
Madam
nothing has
Chair,
happened since.
Another question. So do you have other locations that you're using at this time? Besides right next to the plant?
We have the on-site location, and then since this developed a little bit as a surprise to us, we worked out a emergency site out at our landfill. The downside is that's a one-time deal for us. Landfill is expanding their cells, and they're going to take up the spot that we are currently using. Another reason that we're hesitant for the landfill is it is quite expensive to haul out there. Most of you guys know diesel's well over $5 a gallon in most cases, and our trucks are heavy over-the-road semis that do burn some fuel.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair.
Doug?
This is probably a silly one, I kind of know the answer, but just so the general public does. What are your months of operation at this site? Do you, 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, just so the public knows?
So for this site, we're going to be using it primarily June through late August. I know Kevin noted that at the end of August, we could have up to 4,000 tons on site. That's not gonna all show up at once. It may only be 3-4 truckloads a day going out to the site, but over time, it will build up. The fall, once crops are harvested, we'll probably have a little bigger push getting material out of the site. So it's not oh, we got a place to put it all, let's haul it all at once and dump it. It's a slow build. As we produce, we need to take it where we can.
And just popped in my mind. Is there, once you haul this product out there, over time, is there a shrink to it?
There is. As we haul it right now, it's about 80% water. With the summer like we've had this year, the heat and wind, maybe too much wind, but we get it down to roughly 60% water, so that pile does shrink as we go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for them? Not at this time. We may ask you to come back up.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone here else want to speak to this item?
Good evening. Don Oschlager, Mapleton Township. As you probably all know, the city has a bigger budget than the township does. And Phil was right. I talked to Phil on 7/19. I talked to Mark Cotter on the 21st. Talked to Ryan Johnson on the 22nd. We have a great working relationship with the city of Sioux Falls. I'm here tonight not wanting to risk that relationship, but I'm also here to protect the best interest of the taxpayers of Mapleton Township. So this site was used last year, as they said. They came in from where they said they would, Arrows Road, into the site. They traveled approximately 3 miles of Mapleton Township gravel to distribute this product, to spread it on the fields. I called Phil and I called Kevin, and they said, we're almost done. Perfect. We like that. You're almost done. All the gravel we put on the road, all the mag water we put on the road is also done. Difficult. It's a difficult place to be. I expressed that our interest in this, and Kevin and his office accommodated with the haul road agreement. Mark did contact me. He sent me an email. He had some items listed there. I took it to our attorney. I don't think an email would be suffice from Mapleton Township to the city of Sioux Falls. Therefore, there will be a haul road agreement. It won't be an email. But it's something to get it started. Then I started to get calls from the neighbors out there. And we started to play what if and what about. And there's all things that I don't know much about. Biosolids, storage. Kind of an inquisitive kind of guy, started looking into it, there's quite a packet from the state of South Dakota, a lot of rules you have to follow. I called a guy today because I looked through this thing and I looked at the permits, and I called Kevin and I asked Kevin, how many of you people got this packet? How many of you looked at this application? How many of you would understand what this is? I trust Kevin and I trust his office, and I think they do a great job. But I looked at some things here that come up that I said wasn't really any of my business as a township board supervisor, but maybe it's my business as a concerned citizen. The product cannot be spread on an organic farm. The product cannot be stored over an aquifer. City owns a lot of land in Mapleton Township, lots of land. They don't pay taxes. You guys don't get taxes, we don't get taxes, school district doesn't get taxes. 160 acres, I was notified on this same 160 acres 3 years ago about driveway permits because they have some building eligibilities here. They might sell it, put it back on the tax rolls. I'm going, yes, fantastic. Instead, we're storing biosolids on it. The 100-year floodplain is 480 feet from the berm. I don't know how good the berm is. I didn't build the berm. I don't do that stuff. I think it's a concern. I think it's something that needs to be looked at. Again, this is something that I agreed not to talk about, but because the phone rang off the hook this weekend about this, I have to address it. There are some citizens here that may or may not choose to speak. 400 tons, you guys can do the math. 400 tons in. I just heard there's some shrinks, so maybe there's not 400 tons out. So there's a permit application, and the gentleman at the South Dakota DENR, Raul Vasquez, said that the attached approval letter for your proposed biosolids site, there's nothing I can see that would require you to do any additional testing. I called Raul today. I said, do you know how many tons of biosolids are going to be on that site? He said, no, not really. I said, well, you approved the permit. Well, I don't remember that. I gave him the permit number. I asked him to look it up. It's a lot of biosolids. If they're not safe to put on an organic field, I don't know that there's that safe to be 480 feet from Slip-Up Creek Road either. Mapleton Township is going to have a pretty stiff road haul agreement to work with this. And again, we have a great relationship with the city. They're good to us. The county's good to us. It's three governments that have to make this work. But their budget's a heck of a lot bigger than mine. I would encourage them to sell the land, build a concrete bunker on site. They got 160 acres there. They got 160 acres across the road. They got thousands of acres in the township. Slip-Up Creek, that project, if any of you know what that was about, that's not going to happen anymore. They were going to dam that up, and that was going to be a water source, but they have Lewis and Clark now, so the land that is east of Highway 115 that the city owns is no longer necessary unless we're going to haul and store biosolids on it at the expense of Mapleton Township taxpayers. It's fertilizer, I understand that. It's agriculture. I come from agriculture, I understand that as well. We looked at something similar to this not long ago. I was here. Mr. Gacky wanted to store some lime. Funny thing is, it was the same road, other end. Lime's a heck of a lot safer than this is. Haul road agreement was going to be put in place there too. Not really my position to talk about safety here. 500 feet, you have to be notified for something like this. So just think, if they would have picked another site, and there's nobody within 500 feet, nobody would be here. I don't think 500 feet's a big enough region to notify people, because anybody that's downstream of Slip-Up Creek probably could be the recipient of whatever biosolid runoff there is. They went up there to prepare the site this year, and they had to drag the biosolids out of the trees because of the runoff. 5 inches of rain 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure that berm would have held it. I talked to Mr. Vasquez today, and I said, well, maybe we need to have a concrete bunker with a cover. He said, I like concrete bunkers with covers. I don't know, folks. This is a tough one, and I'm at risk of ruining a relationship. I hope not, with the city of Sioux Falls and Mapleton Township. I think there's three governments here, and I think all three governments need to work together to make this work. And I don't know how you make it work. The haul road permit, I don't have a copy. Our attorney, Dean Hammer, was going to provide that. I haven't gotten it yet. I was going to present that to them. There's also some conditions that were on the permit, but I don't know what the conditions were. I don't know, Kevin, did you look into that at all? So the permit, from the state, SDL 022128, is a permit, but it says the permittee must comply with all conditions of this permit. Any permit non-compliance constitutes a violation. Well, I have the cover letter, but I don't know what the conditions are. Kevin, did you figure out what the conditions were? If not, I think we should know what the state conditions are before we approve it through the county, but perhaps that's been done. Earlier today, I talked to Kevin and he wasn't sure, but anyway, I put Kevin in a difficult spot when he had to make the city do this. We're in a difficult spot with working relationships with the city, but I'm not sure this is the best place for this. The question was, do we have these storage anywhere else? Any other township? No. They don't own land in any other township. They only own land in Mapleton Township, plus a landfill. Landfill is already licensed for this, that's why it's out there now. So, they've got some land on 258, that's a Blacktop County road. They're gonna have some land available. They own the land where Slip Up Creek is, next to the cemetery. I don't think anybody wants this piled next to the cemetery and the wedding event barn. I'm just trying to find some place on some blacktop where we don't have to have a haul road permit and we don't have to destroy all the gravel and the mag water that we put in front of the rural homeowners where we try to do road management. So anyway, any questions for me?
Madam Chair? Can two trucks meet on that road?
I'm sorry.
Can two trucks meet on that road if they're hauling, I think they said 4 truckloads a day?
Possibly, but it would be, one of them would be wheels on the edge for sure. The other concern is school buses. You know, there's a family up the road. Travis Dressen just moved into his new house up the road. He's a state engineer. He's in the same situation I am. He works for government. Travis doesn't want to come and speak to this either, but there comes a time someone has to do it. So his parents have lived there for a long, long time. They call me. There's 2 other families that live there are concerned. Dealt with it last year. Phone lit up last year, and then this weekend there's quite a few calls about it as well. So here we are. There's got to be another place somewhere. Of course, it's not permitted. They would have to start over with permits, and I understand that's an issue too. So last year it was in, but when it went down the gravel. And Phil's right. They put it in. They knifed it in a few years ago. They were knifing some in, and they were traveling on a half-mile blacktop that we had. And I called Phil and asked him if he would take a different route and stay off the blacktop. And I mean, they're very accommodating. They went around, they went the extra mile and went around and came in, and they went slow, and we bladed the road and they knifed the product in, and they did everything we asked them to do. It's just that I'm not sure that we can keep up to this, and the right haul road agreement, we can probably take care of that. It's the rest of it. I don't know that that's a safe place for it. So when the guy that rubber stamped their permit wasn't aware of the tonnage, concerns me a little bit. So, did anybody visit the site? Any of them?
I've been by it many times.
Sure you have, I imagine. All right,
Madam Chair, could I just ask you one question?
absolutely.
How long will it take you to get so the township would have the right haul road specs, in a month, could you have that if,
I think Kevin had September 1 on the permit. I know that we could do it quicker than that, I would assume. I was going to get some samples from our attorney who had done them for other people, so he had some samples that we were gonna work. And then we could take and tweak them to meet something that the city could agree to and something that we could agree to as well. So, yeah, it could be done.
and I get the part where you mentioned about the school buses, but school will be out pretty much the whole time that they're gonna be driving on this.
Yeah, through June to September.
Yeah, so that would alleviate a lot with the school buses.
Yeah, I don't know when they'll be done, but that may be just a short overlap, wouldn't be much. 6 in the morning till, what are they, 7 in the morning till 6 at night? Was that the permit? Doesn't matter, but, so, Mr. Gacky couldn't do line, but the city of Sioux Falls can do bio. I don't know, doesn't seem right, guys.
Jeff, did you have a comment?
Couple of questions. Don, you're a wonderful speaker, by the way, and I don't know why, after all these years, you're not a county commissioner instead of me. What would you like us to do? I certainly share some of your concerns on this. Could the city pay some additionally towards the maintenance on the road, up to perhaps even paving it? And as far as the state being a rubber stamp, I have that concern also. I mean, I don't see the state enforcing any rules on any kind of pollution in this state. You know, we put in a new cheese plant that dumps in, nitrates into the water system, and what does the state do? They, I think they fined Smithfield a couple of times, but probably not at the level of what Smithfield dumps in the river. Anyway, what would you like us to do?
Jeff, I think we can, I think the main concern for us, and what I also have told the city, is for us, it's the haul road. And I believe that we can work that out with a haul road agreement. And I know that with the city letting us know we're going to be hauling from this window to this window, we will automatically be doing additional blading. I mean, it's a haul road agreement that we have to do to maintain and keep that road in good condition. It's gonna take gravel. That's basically for us, Jeff, what we need, and that's in there. The rest of it was concerned citizens. The rest of it is, that I talked about, was things that I didn't even talk about with the city because I felt that it had been taken care of already. I figured if they got the permits, we're good to go, but, reading through the permits, I'm just not completely satisfied with them either, but that's, it's not my dog to chase, so. You're right, Jeff. True Shrimp was gonna build a plant in Laverne, Minnesota. They couldn't clean up the water. They couldn't get the salt out of it, so South Dakota said, bring it to Madison, we'll let you build it here. Can't get the water clean enough for Minnesota, but we can put it in the Sioux River. I don't know, it's just frustrating, but that's not why I'm here as a township board supervisor. I'm here I got roads and fire on my mind, so,
Thank you.
okay?
Any other questions for him? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak to this item? Please state your name and address, sir.
My name's Mike Bangasser, and I live 3/4 mile west of there. I actually, 50 years ago, our family farmed that ground. And I can tell you, going by there every day, watched what they've done. Their berm was they scratched up the ground around it and pulled it up. That ground is light. We could only get about 3/4 of a crop off of that if it didn't burn up, because it's very light and sandy ground. That berm's not gonna hold anything. Who is going out there and gonna inspect it and do it the correct way? There needs to be clay hauled in there if they're gonna put up a berm and you guys are gonna allow it. It's not done correct. Did they go out and soil sample that after they did not have all the permits last year and they piled it up there? I called in and asked when they were hauling it out because we were getting tired of meeting the trucks. The wife just about got hit twice because they don't stop or look. They pulled right out of the driveway, halfway down in the ditch and to make the corner. I don't know what to do, you know. I don't think it's proper. I think the ground needs to be tested up there, how much that was leached out, because he even stood up here and said, it's going out at 80%. They had no berm. They're 400 and some feet from the creek, and it's all downhill through them trees. I think there needs to be a lot of stuff done before this permit can go ahead with it. I don't know if it needs called down to Denver to the EPA and have the guys come out and do the sampling. If there is, then there's fines coming out. Government never does anything without doing fines. You guys gotta cover your butt on this, because if it gets down, leaches through their crappy berms, or not put up properly, or not inspected, and it gets down in the water, somebody's gonna have to pay for it. Especially when, well, the red dotted line's there, or the red line is their boundary for the 100-year flood plan. It's not very far from that yellow to that red point. And if you can see just on beyond that, that's the creek. I honestly think that something needs to be looked at. More tests need to be done. They just can't go and say, well, we're gonna throw up some dirt and dump this crap out there. It's free fertilizer. No, there's expense somewhere down the road all the time when somebody says it's free. Any questions?
Any questions for him? Thank you. Anyone else care to address this item? City have any rebuttal?
First off, I'd like to thank everybody to come out and express their concerns. We did talk to several of the neighbors. Kevin did give us a list of the people that were within the 500 feet. We also got a name of some renters and stuff and discussed this with them. I apologize, we didn't get to everybody. So to answer a few of the questions that were brought up. In 2021, there was traffic that did go to the west. The reason for this is we had a application site that was to the west. Shortest route wins. Sorry to say that, but it is. We did get a phone call from Don at the end of our land application process for that site. We did finish up within I think it was less than 6 hours after I talked to Don. We pulled all of our equipment out. So we weren't aware of any concerns up until the day we were done. Going forward, we're not gonna go that route. We know this. We're just keeping ahead of it now and going forward. Don brought up that this is not safe for organic farms. Little bit of a gray area on that one. This is considered an all-natural product, not an organic product. So organic farms don't want it because it's not an organic fertilizer. So it's right, but it's kind of a gray area there. Reason it's not organic is we don't know what everybody puts down the drain in the city. Our process is very good, but it's not perfect. So The organic labeling is just not an option for us. Many cities label this as an all natural product, not organic. There's been several comments brought up to the 100-year floodplain. As you can see on the graphic behind you and off to the side here, the 100-year floodplain is shown on our maps. We have to note that on every site that we go to. We are not allowed to touch anything in the 100-year floodplain. The federal government requires us to have a 10-meter setback from a 100-year floodplain. 10 meters is only 33 feet. State of South Dakota and our team has established a 50-foot setback if we were to do land application on this site. We go above and beyond on all federal and state regulations to maximize the safety of this product. I have zero concern with it. Sadly, I've been covered head to toe in this stuff more times than I wish to count. I'm still here to talk to you. I have no health conditions that I'm currently aware of. So it's not the most pleasant thing in the world to think about, but it's also not this big boogeyman that you should be scared of. This is a wonderful product produced by over 2,500 municipalities throughout this country that is very heavily regulated. Biosolids are the most studied most studied constituent of wastewater by EPA. New regulations, all that do come out every year. We follow them if they're applicable to us. There's certain things that we don't send this to landscapers. We don't send it to that type of stuff yet. It's a long-term goal. We'll make it safe enough to where you can put it on your lawn, but we're just not there yet. The issue of two trucks meeting on the road, it is possible. Our trucks have done it many times. It is a little tight. It is a country road, but you can make space for two full semis to meet on that road. A couple of the bridges, probably better use your better judgment. The issue with pulling out in front of individuals, that was an approach. There's two approaches on this site. If you look on the graphic, you'll see the shelter belt that touches the road to the north there. There is a field entrance there as well. We began using that approach early last year during the hauling out phase. We quickly found that it wasn't an appropriate entrance to the road, so we stopped use of it. Everything that was said about that approach is accurate. There was some turning off into the grass on the edge, hard to see with the trees and stuff there, but my guys notified me of a couple of close calls, so we just stopped using that right away. As for sampling of the site, by the state regulations, we do have to soil sample that site. We sample it down to 5 feet of depth to ensure that there is no nitrogen leaching. And then, as a side note, this site is able to have the product spread on the surface as a fertilizer for itself. When we do that, we're required to sample down to 2 feet of depth. We do land application based off of agronomic rate, based on crop needs, what's in the soil, and then analysis of our product. The berm not being sufficient, the berm is actually one part of our runoff control measures. The federal EPA guidelines and the state guidelines both list berms, grass planting. There's some stuff to do with lime that you can cover and do some stuff like that. So we actually use a combination of a berm that is covered in grass. As long as there's 80% surface coverage, it's considered acceptable. I don't know if anybody other than Kevin's been out there, but the berm definitely has 80% vegetative cover. And then there is a 6 foot, actually it's bigger in certain areas, setback from the tree grove that is planted in grass. And then the tree grove itself has grasses, weeds, brush, trees, all that. So runoff off the site is very well monitored and contained. We do get big rains. I'm out there that day. Sometimes I'm out there in the rain, you know, making sure we're following all the rules. So, the state did send us a letter. I sent it to Kevin this afternoon. He brought up a good point of, it wasn't a very clear letter of approval for the site to store biosolids. I spoke with Raul from DANR now. He updated the letter and did, you know, let us know that the site is approved for storage. It did meet all of the state requirements. And just for reference, those state requirements are, this site was public noticed for 30 days in the Argus Leader. It was public notice for 30 days in the Capital Journal. The state did a thorough evaluation of aquifers, any neighboring well sites, soil conditions. So the state does do good diligence on approving these sites. I also, if you have any questions on the soils, they're included at the back of the packet of what the predominant soils of the area are. They are light, I'm not gonna deny that, but they're still good soils.
Madam Chair.
Any other questions for Doug?
Would you object, or maybe it's covered in the fine print of all the regulations, but how about a monitoring well? I mean, just before, just so you can cover your tail. I mean, you know what the water would be like pre-dumping, and then throughout the year you could sample it.
I'm gonna defer to you on that one.
I guess I wouldn't recommend that. A monitoring well is only one spot, and that's all it's gonna sample. If you were gonna do that, you'd wanna probably put several of them out there, and that's, the state's already got regulations on it, and I would go with what they have to provide.
Okay,
I
I'm
guess,
just
I mean, that would just be my recommendation.
Okay, it's just a question I had.
So, yeah, I get where you're coming.
Anyone else have any questions for them? Jeff?
So at this point, do we have a signed road agreement with the township? I mean, on paper?
Okay.
No, we don't. That's something that Kevin put in his report, that we would be required to get, not us, but I think the way I understand the process is the county would put that together, and then we would look at it, and it'd go back and forth between.
How long would it take?
It's required in their recommendations to have that done by September 15th, is that correct?
Not by August 1st? I mean, really, how hard can it be to come to this kind of agreement?
I think with the discussion that our Public Works Director had with Don, I think they pretty much ironed that out during, that's my understanding in that discussion.
I guess my concern is that if it's not on paper and signed, that
That's one of the recommendations, that it would be. Yeah.
by the end of the fall season. Anyway, I'm not sure that's sufficient for me.
Anyone else have any questions for them? Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else in the audience care to address this item?
Madam Chairman, I just, for a point of clarification, it's not, the Hall Road Agreement is something, it's an agreement between the township and the city of Sioux Falls. It's not the county's not a participant in that, so. And what was the date that they need to have it by, Kevin?
September 15th is what the condition is, and you can change that.
Couple more things. Hall Road Agreement, I think we can move pretty quickly on that. Again, I'm waiting for our attorney to present something as a sample that we can review with the city. Secondly, the permit that is in place right now expires on September 30th of 2025 for this site. I don't know what the process is to reapply. I don't know what the process is to extend that. But the other thing is, you know, Phil and I had a good conversation the other day, and admittedly so, the amount of product piled up there right now will be the least amount. The new facility, a sewage treatment facility, won't change. The amount of product being hauled up there, the tonnage that's going there now is the lowest amount. And it will go up from there. 5 years, 10 years. I don't know how much they can put up there. I mean, there's no restrictions as to how many tons. 4,000 tons now. You know, if that's 8,000 tons in 5 years or 3 years, 2025, 3 years when the permit expires, as the tonnage goes up, the traffic goes up. The haul road's in place. Hopefully, we have a haul road agreement that's good enough that the tonnage won't matter. But if the tonnage goes up, the trucks go up, the traffic goes up, the burden goes up. So anyway, those things I wanted to add. I don't know if you can put a limit on the amount that's stored up there or not. I don't think that's something that they would want. I don't know if they have room. What the long-range plan is, maybe by 2025, they have a concrete bunker on site out there, and they don't have to haul it twice. It's expensive for them to haul it twice, and I don't think they want to do it. I just don't think they have a choice. It would be nice if we weren't doing this, but we need to out of necessity. I understand that. So anyway, that's all I wanted to add. Okay? Any questions?
Any questions for him? Jeff?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Madam Chair, let's go to commission discussion on this, I think.
Okay. I'm going to close the floor, so it's up to the commissioners now.
Kevin, do you have any other recommendations? Do you want to, is there an item that will cause a haul road agreement to happen before they finish hauling up there?
All right. So I'll bring up in the staff report, there are 8 conditions for approval. Specifically dealing with the haul road is condition number 5, that a haul road agreement must be obtained with Mapleton Township on or before September 15th, 2020. The haul road agreement must be maintained while operation exists on the property. We can change that date to kind of any time suitable. If we want to put that by August 15th, we could do that. Or even have this part of the agreement must be in place before hauling starts and just leave it open. And they can't haul anything out there until the agreement's in place. So if the agreement is signed tomorrow, they can haul the next day.
Thank you.
Any ideas?
Doug, what do you think?
Well, my biggest concern is that, the haul road agreement, that's utmost. I mean, the city's not paying any taxes out there. The
So
burden
true.
would be all on the taxpayers of Mapleton Township. So I think definitely there would have to be above and beyond what's recommended. I mean, as growth continues to expand, there's a possibility more material to be hauled out there. So that haul road is by far the number one concern I have.
So did you want to improve the date on it? September 15th is like the end of the season.
Right, that's the end of the season, yeah.
So then we can wait till next year to sign it.
And then we can close it down.
Madam Chair, I think that Doug has got it correctly there, and I don't know what the date is that it should be, but I think something like this could be done sooner than expected, and I'll suggest a date of August 19th, which is a Friday, for an agreement to be signed. And the city's got a budget of over $600 million. Minnehaha County has a budget of $100 million. Don? Sorry, Madam Chair,
I'm sorry, we would need to approve a haul road agreement at our meeting on the 9th of August, or we would have to call a special meeting. So we would have to have that as an agenda item on our August 9th meeting. We would try to put that together by then.
okay, that's 2 weeks.
It's 2 weeks.
So I can push our attorney to get that done, and get it to the city, get something put in place. If we don't get it approved at that meeting, it would roll over to the September meeting or call a special meeting. We can't sign an agreement like that without having an agenda item on our township agenda.
So what do you think? You want to leave that? The date you suggested, they'd have to almost have a special meeting.
Well, unless they approved it on the 9th and
Yeah,
had it
if you can
signed
get
by,
the information
the
together
19th.
with your attorney.
I
I
guess
don't like the fact that you don't have an agreement at all, okay? That's just me. I've sat on a township board and I know how that works. It's not great, folks, because one person says this thing, says this way, and township board says this way, but you don't have anything concrete because there's no agreement been drawn at all.
Well, my position as township board supervisor is to leave the township better than I found it. And when the gentlemen are all in the room, it's perfect.
Come forward, Don.
Thanks, Don.
When, as I was saying, when the gentlemen are in the room, a gentleman agreement is fine. But when there's different supervisors there, and these gentlemen no longer sit in their positions, Mr. Cotter's gone, then that agreement is no good. And so we need to have this as a whole agreement. It needs to be put in place, it needs to be filed, it needs to be on record. So we can work hard to get it done and get it approved by that meeting. That would meet or exceed the date that you said, Jeff. I mean, no later than, if you want to move on that. That would be our goal, so we don't have to call a special meeting. We would try to get it put together, and I think we can do that.
So I will make a motion to add the condition August 19th with a, if an agreement isn't made, then they need to shut the operation down till they come back to us.
That was your motion, Jeff?
That's my motion.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay? Any further discussion? Otherwise, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
With that additional condition, I would make a motion to approve this CUP.
And I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and second to approve the conditional use permit 22-54. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we'll move on to item number 5. Scott?
Thank you. Scott Anderson, Planning Director, and item number 5 was pulled off the consent calendar, and it's a conditional use permit request, 2257, to transfer and to make 5 building eligibilities available on property in Section 2 of Brandon Township. The applicant is Marv Manifold, and if you want to forward it to the map, it would be best. So, as you can see from the map, this is a fairly simple request. The applicant has several quarters with building eligibilities on them, and he wants to move them basically to the southeast quarter or portion of his property, which is, you'll see the railroad tracks that lead into Brandon and Corson are there. And you also see that there is Split Rock Creek that flows on a portion of the property. The applicant already has a conditional use permit for a family campground. Some of you may have been on the planning commission when we addressed this probably 10 or 12 years ago, maybe not. But, so there is already an existing use there as a campground. And it's my understanding that if you read through the narrative provided by the applicant, he has access to or interest in perhaps purchasing a house to move onto this family campground to be used for like a family lodge or weekend use. So they're not increasing the density, and I think that when you look at the overall plan, I think they wanted to have one made available to be able to use purchase this property, this house, have it moved onto the site. So the applicant decided to address all of this at the same time and make the other building eligibilities available. When we deal with building eligibilities, we look at overall density. It's not moving it any closer to any existing feedlots or CAFOs. It is moving them closer to the gravel road, 257th, which is really the only access to these parcels, which is off of 257th. So with that being said, we're recommending approval of the request with two conditions: that a right to farm notice be filed prior to the issuance of a building permit for that single-family dwelling, and that the applicant have the approval of Brandon Township for any new approaches that are constructed. There is already an existing approach, which he has approved through the Brandon Township, but if any new approaches are constructed, he would need to get approval from the township. I'd be glad to show you some pictures. Right now, this is looking up onto the property where the building eligibilities are located. If you continue to scroll down there, you'll see this is the access road. You can see the creek, and off to the distance, you can see the existing family campground, and I think I might have a shot closer of the family campground. This is the Split Rock Creek, and keep on going. I think that's it. So, but it does show this is where they're locating the building eligibilities. The applicant is here. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
Madam Chair,
Doug?
just clarify for the audience, it's out of the floodplain, this site?
So part of the property, of course, is in the floodplain.
Right, I see that, yeah.
But that would actually be addressed when they applied for the for the building permit.
Okay.
We would then verify on the site plan that they submit that the structure that they're relocating or building would be out of the floodplain, or they would have to obtain a floodplain development permit. But typically, we try to get people out of the floodplain.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for him? Is the petitioner here? Will you please step forward, state your name and address?
Marvin Manifold. I live at 2600 South 6 Mile Road, Sioux Falls. We have a lot of development in our area, so I'm considering moving up there, using it as a summer home. And only want to use one eligibility. I have no plans on selling or doing anything with the other ones. I had the opportunity to buy a house, but I think I like my house on Highway 11 a lot better, so I'm gonna hopefully move that up there.
Any questions for him? Not at this time. Thank you.
Yep.
There was someone that wanted this moved to, will you step forward, sir, and state your name and address and your concern?
Hello, my name is Steve Farley, and my address is 48292 257th Street, which is just south of the proposed site that we're talking about.
I have 3 acres down there that I live on. And I just have basically a couple questions, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to hear Marvin. He maybe already addressed these questions, but number one, we're talking 5 eligibilities. Is it permissible to have the 5 eligibilities so close together? Aren't they usually more spread out in a section or whatever? But and then what the development timeline for these 5 eligibilities? I think maybe I heard he wasn't planning on selling them, but I'm sure if you have 5 eligibilities, I'm sure sometime soon there could be 5 properties up there, which would be like a little development. And I guess those are my 2 concerns or questions I would like answers.
Okay. We'll have somebody step forward and address your questions.
Pardon me?
I'll have someone step forward and address
Okay.
your questions.
Thank you.
Marvin, can you address those?
Okay, I just have plans of using one eligibility for a house that I'm gonna probably move up there. I can't remember what the questions were.
I forgot what the other question was.
The
too.
question was, is it appropriate to move 5 eligibilities in
Oh.
that area? And I think this is a question more for staff, which I think the answer is yes, but I'll let them comment to that.
So to address that, it's not uncommon at all to cluster eligibilities together. There's definitely a benefit in that because you free up, instead of having a lot of farmland used up, you're able to cluster them and move them into an area which may not be as productive, and you can move them to where maybe they're more desirable. And this is quite a beautiful piece of property. If he was to develop that at a future date, you could have some very nice houses that overlook Split Rock Creek. But just so I'm a lot louder than Marv, he's only gonna potentially just use one. He indicated in his narrative that he's not planning on using him at this time, the other 4. He just wants to make one available.
Okay, anyone else care to address this item? I'm gonna close the floor. Commissioners?
Madam Chair, I guess I think this seems like a pretty straightforward request, so I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll
I s-
second that.
Okay, I have a motion and second to approve conditional use permit 22-57. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I abstained. I was out of the room, sorry.
We didn't see that. Okay, that item has been approved, so that means you're free to go. Move on to item number 6. Kevin?
All right, I am Kevin Hookman again, County Planning staff. This item, I'll try to go through this a little bit quicker. This item is located approximately 1 mile south of Wall Lake. The request is to allow a major home occupation of custom construction of pallets and crates in the property. The property came to the attention of planning staff due to complaints by the neighbors. The complaints have ranged from various different things, including the condition of the property and activities in the property such as the pallet business. The pallet business can meet all the requirements of a Class 1 major home occupation. I just will highlight 3 criteria that are part of the ordinance that should be addressed as part of this. And that criteria 1 and similarly criteria 7 both address outside storage, that there's no outside storage allowed as part of a home occupation. And as I flip through the photos here in a little bit, you'll see that as of right now, there is some outdoor storage on the property, and the petitioner's planning on addressing that. Criteria 3 limits employees to 4 employees on site. If you look at the petitioner's narrative. He says he has up to 6 employees. They're all family members. So at no more than 4 people can be working on the home occupation at any one time, is what it can be limited to. So they'll just have to rotate the other 2 through the job site if they have jobs. And then criteria 5 limits noise from the house. The home occupation to be 60 decibels during the hours of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and audible sounds are restricted during evening hours from 6 p.m. back to 8 a.m. And this has been one of the concerns by the neighbors was the noise. I will kind of skip forward to the conditional use permit criteria number 5, because number 5 addresses that measures are taken to control offensive odors, fumes, dust, noise, vibration, and lighting, so they do not constitute a nuisance. So when I visited the site, I'll point this out here. I'm gonna go to the photos first. All right, so when I visited the site, you'll see that the petitioner did clean up some of the site. Kind of the garage and looking back. If you look back this direction, you'll see the driveway kind of continues beyond there, and the petitioner would like to put a future shed up in that location as a kind of a future storage or expansion to the business. And this is looking south down the driveway, not the driveway, the road, Apple Lane, that's the private road. And this is looking down the south part of the property line. And right here, I'll just point at this photo. There's actually nothing in this photo that is against the ordinance. All those vehicles are licensed and operable. But you'll see in this photo, the start of some of the material storage, and then there's a camper just to the left side of the photo. And this is when I noticed some of these things when I visited a site, that the outdoor storage and other vehicles. There's a closer of the outdoor storage, and then there's a photo of the vehicles on the site, and there's one more back here. So that is some of the items that need to be addressed, and staff is recommending deferral of this item so that the petitioner has time to address some of these items. And specifically, I'll read off the items that should be addressed. The 6 unlicensed and inoperable vehicles must be licensed, removed, or placed within an enclosed building. All motorized vehicles or equipment which does not require a license must be operational or stored within an enclosed building. Like, for example, I don't think I have in a photo, there's a skid loader on the property. The skid loader is used for maintenance of the property. It appears like it's being used to move those pallets and things. And it looks like it's operational, so it can stay outside. The dilapidated camper must be removed or placed within an enclosed building. And then all building materials, pallets, and crates must be placed indoors. And that's gonna be part, the petitioner has pointed out that he's been doing some home projects the garage is pretty new. He's added onto the house. And that has not allowed for some of the space to store these items inside. Because these items will take some time to address, staff is recommending the deferral to go to October 24th Planning Commission meeting. I guess I am here for any questions. I know the petitioner is here, and I think some of the neighbors are here as well.
Any questions for him? Guess not. Is the petitioner here?
Site plan.
Will you please step forward and state your name and address, sir?
Hi, my name is Tanner Hilger. Our address 26680 Apple Lane, Hartford.
Commissioners have any questions for him?
How do you feel about deferring this?
I think it's gracious to give us time to do these things. I have no problem meeting that deadline. It just moves everything to the priority list that we can get it all solved.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I just have
Doug?
probably a couple questions to ask Tanner. When you get these pallets constructed, do you haul them out of there with a gooseneck trailer? Do you have a semi that comes in and moves them out? That's my concern, with the neighbors. 'Cause I guess I wouldn't want a semi pulling down my driveway and.
No, it's a great question. We use a car hauler.
Okay.
Tow it behind our personal vehicle.
All right.
Any other questions for him? Not at this time. Thank you. Anyone else care to address this item? Please step forward, state your name and address.
Cheryl Fromm, 26689 Apple.
Cheryl Fromm, is that what you're?
To start with, I live directly next to him, and
Could you please speak by the mic so people
I
can
didn't
hear
get
you?
notice of this meeting at all. I know he's been running this business for years, and I don't know what's happening over there, but there's nonstop burning. There's burning in 4 burn barrels from sometimes 9 in the morning till 6 at night. Black smoke, white smoke, even when there's a burn ban. There's incessant pounding all the time. There's a saw that makes a real loud whining noise. You can't even keep your windows open at home or go outside and have a conversation because of that noise. It used to go till about midnight. Now I think he's stopped about maybe 10. The road is completely breaking down with these trailers in and out. We have so many potholes. There's one part where there's a culvert and both sides are breaking down, and I'm afraid it's not gonna probably last. We've had so many flat tires. The other neighbor and I that live down there, from driving in and out, I don't know if the nails are flying out, what's happening, but just numerous flat tires. We've addressed all these things. We don't really get any satisfaction with it. You move into the country to have peace and quiet, and we can't even have our windows open or, sit outside on the deck without this constant whining. I have some pictures. I don't know if you can see, if you want to pass them around or what.
Well, we do have the Elmo. I'm not sure if we've used it.
I think some of them Kevin probably addressed. There's so many vehicles back there, and a lot of them aren't registered.
We're not completely done with this, this meeting room. There'll be a different podium in the future.
Okay.
But this is what we got. This is the first time we've met in here with anything.
And I've had such a hard time keeping him, his family, and his animals off my property. 'Cause it's, okay, because it's right next to my land. And finally, last year, I got fed up. I had it surveyed. I put up a
There it comes
fence. So now I go back there and I have to pick up their trash. So, I would think this would be better if he would rent a storage unit or something and give us our peace and quiet, because that property is an eyesore now. All those, the kids came over one time and told me as soon as the lights go off in the house, there's as many as 16 mousetraps snapping. So I would think all that junk in the backyard would be a health hazard. But this definitely affects me, and I didn't even know about it without Larry telling me, so. And the driving is, we all got together, the the four of us neighbors and sent him a letter saying, please slow down. Your kids are on the road, the neighbors' kids are on the road, my granddaughter's on the road. Please slow down. It got worse. So he put up a speed bump, and now they just go flying over that. And his kids are out there playing on the road more than anybody, so I would think that they would be concerned that they'd hit them. And I just don't want to see that happen.
Sure.
Jeff?
Cheryl, I think you make some excellent points, and, you know, I think you probably need to be back when we meet on this again, but I appreciate your input. And unfortunately, in this job, I've seen pictures like those way too often, places around the county, so.
I know if it was in town, they would be in hauling stuff away. It's terrible. So,
Here, could I share
Doug?
one? About how many feet between your residence and this site?
where I live or my property,
Let's say where you live right now.
I think, yeah.
250 feet or yards? 250 feet. Okay.
The direct shot, you can hear even them talking.
So less than a football field.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, any other questions for her?
Madam Chair,
Thank
I have a question about who owns the road.
It's a private road. I don't think anybody owns it. I have property, the whole area on one side. Tanner has part of it and Larry has part of it on the other side.
So is there an agreement about maintenance?
There has not been.
There's no road agreement or road
No, and
district?
we aren't getting anywhere with discussions, so.
Okay,
Thank you.
anything else?
Madam Chair, I guess I'd like to defer this until we meet again and hope to see some improvement or better communication anyway.
And was that date October 24th?
Yeah.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and second to defer item 6, conditional use permit 22-59 to October 24th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Move on to old business. Mason?
Yes, Commissioners, I just wanted to let you guys know the 2 items that were appealed from your last meeting to the county commission were approved by the county commission. Conditional use permit 2244 to allow an agricultural related operation for colostrum storage was approved with an additional 7th condition requiring that they meet the site plan so that they could not expand past what was approved with that permit without more approval later. And then conditional use permit 2249 to allow a Class C hog CAFO was approved with 8 conditions. So the 9th condition requiring trees on the north side of the barn was removed by the county commission and the item was approved. So that might be being really echoey, but that is all I have for old business.
Thank you. New business?
I have a new item for new business, and that would be just a reminder that I sent out an email about our get-together on August 11th. It's going to be held at the Safari Bar in Renner. I happened to drive by there today. They're doing all kinds of dirt work up there, so hopefully it will not be windy from the northwest. Otherwise, we will be covered in dirt. August 18th. Sorry.
18th?
18th.
Okay.
And you need to know a number or no?
Generally, yeah. I'll send out another email and I'll call or send out an email before. So Becky has indicated she's going to be there, and I think Bonnie's going to be there hopefully. And Jeff said he's buying the first round, so that should entice anyone to come.
Just the first?
That's all.
As it is.
Move adjournment.
Or adjourn.
we've already discussed that item, and it's been deferred. You maybe refer it to.
Move adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Jeepers, we beat 9 o'clock.
But we begin this hour with Congressman Adam Kinzinger and the January 6th committee's work. So I want to start by playing for our viewers an excerpt from a new video released by your colleague, Elaine Luria, this morning, featuring testimony related to President Trump's January 7th speech that your committee showed excerpts of during last week's hearing. But let's watch.
Do you recognize what this is?
It looks like a copy of a draft of the remarks for that day.
Okay. And as you can see throughout the document, there are lines crossed out. There are there's some words added in. Do you recognize the handwriting?
It looks like my father's handwriting.
In my view, he needed to express very clearly that the people who committed violent acts, went into the Capitol, did what they did, should be prosecuted and should be arrested.
It looks like here that he crossed out that he was directing the Department of Justice to ensure all lawbreakers are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. We must send a clear message, not with mercy, but with justice. Legal consequences must be swift and firm. Do you know why he wanted that crossed out?
I don't know.
And that needed to be stated forcefully. They did not represent him or his political views in any form or fashion.
He also has crossed out, I want to be very clear, you do not represent me. You do not represent our movement. Do you know why he crossed that language out of the statement?
I don't know.
Congressman, this seems to be more evidence that President Trump was pushing back against any condemnation of the rioters the day after the riot. What is your interpretation of what has just been released?
I mean, it's more evidence to the fact that he, first off, sat for 3 hours, not doing nothing, but proactively resisting pressure to do something, because I believe he wanted to see where this would go. It's kind of like, well, let's see how this develops over, the next, what would be 3 hours. And then, of course, very tepidly, only when compelled and when he realized that the battle for the Capitol had basically shifted in favor of law enforcement, did he come out with very weak statements. He still said, this is what you get when you steal an election at the end of the day on a tweet. And then the next day, again, it's a matter of, I don't want to disavow these folks. They're fighting for me. And by the way, to anybody that still believes these conspiracies that it was Antifa or FBI directed, then obviously President Trump loves Antifa if that's the case, because he's continuing to say these are my people. So, look, this is just more evidence. We could have had a 5-hour hearing actually on Thursday, but we had to obviously keep that to 2.5 hours, and so more evidence will come out.
And let's talk about Ginny Thomas, because your colleague Liz Cheney said that you are contemplating subpoenaing her if she does not appear voluntarily. How long are you going to wait to try to see whether these talks with her attorney bear fruit?
Yeah, I mean, that's an attorney-to-attorney conversation. Our folks on the committee are very good at knowing when they're being played versus when it's kind of a legitimate negotiation. And they will come forward and say, if we get to that point, hey, it's time to subpoena. Ginny Thomas started out as kind of uninterest. You know, we had a few pieces of evidence that we had seen, and then it just grew, particularly with some of the Eastman memos and those conversations, reaching out to state electors. We want to have a voluntary conversation. You know, just come on in. She said, I think somewhere in the media, that she was eager to talk to the committee. That's it. Come in, let's talk. If we need a subpoena, we will, but we prefer, obviously, to just find out what she knows.
But if she said a while ago now that she was eager to talk, why is it taking so long to secure her cooperation and her appearance?
That's a question for her and the lawyer. Look, it's the same thing. You know, we heard through anonymous sources that Secret Service was eager to come in and testify on some of the limo incidents, and they haven't come in. And you know, it's one thing to put stuff through anonymous sources or to say something in the media. It's another when you have your lawyer saying, "Hey, we need to do this a little differently." And so, if we have to subpoena, we will. We're going to get to the bottom of as much as we possibly can. And hopefully the Department of Justice, not related to our investigation, is looking at whether or not there are potential crimes here.
And to the Secret Service, and the point that the head of the Secret Service again reiterated this weekend, that they are fully cooperating, but they still have not come in. They say they can't recover those text messages from January 5th and 6th. Are you going to try to subpoena their personal phones, which apparently have not yet been checked by the IG, the Homeland Security Inspector General?
Well, certainly an issue we're talking about. Again, there's a lot of behind-the-scene conversations going on. We'd much prefer to get stuff voluntarily. It's an interesting question, obviously, with all these missing texts. Could it be just simply not keeping records and at management? Possibly. Could it be a cover-up? Possibly. We don't know the answer to that. You know, we do know that there are some questions out there. We do know that when you roll over technology, you're required to keep records. So we want to get that answer as best we can. It's why we've decided we're not going to wrap up the investigation. We're going to continue the investigation over the summer, even as we begin to write some of the interim report.
Is that the key piece that you want to nail down, the Secret Service cooperation and what happened to those texts?
You know, it's a part. I mean, there's a lot of, again, we still have people coming in, you know, around the edges, maybe not as explosive as Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, for instance, but maybe they know a certain piece here. We're going to follow up with some witnesses that maybe, you know, gave us answers that now don't really make a lot of sense with more information that we've gotten. So we have a great investigative team that has done a lot of work over the winter leading into these hearings, and they're going to continue it over the summer. I'm very proud of the team that's been put together. And by the way, this moment in Congress, this committee in Congress, is something quite historic, and unfortunately probably will never happen again in terms of polling to the direction of justice.
You've talked a lot, you've created a lot of information about what was happening during those 187 minutes, nearly just about 3 hours. Have you nailed down anything more about the president's communications with Rudy Giuliani during that period?
You know, what we've presented is a significant amount of, we know the conversation. Obviously, one thing we can't do in subpoena is get what was said over the telephone. It's usually what's called call detail records, which is who called who, how long that lasted. Obviously, if people turn over their text messages, we have that. So there's probably going to be some information that, you know, without certain people coming in and telling us the truth, will have to be left to a little bit of mystery. But what we've presented is, I think, compelling enough to say the president absolutely knew what was going on, and he proactively chose not to defend the Article I branch of the Constitution, and that was a decision. And that was a decision utterly at odds with the oath he swore to the Constitution.
In terms of any further communications between the president and Mark Meadows, are you any closer to understanding those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, we have some understanding. There's some stuff, again, that we haven't presented. You may see more in the report. You may see more in future hearings. But I got to tell you, actually, first off, Mark Meadows has been one of our star witnesses. Even though he's not cooperating, his initial tranche of texts that he's turned over really led to a lot of what we've learned in the investigation. And then, as you know, he refused to cooperate with the committee after that. And we have voted to hold him in contempt, and the DOJ so far has not taken action. So I hope they do. I hope he decides to come in and voluntarily cooperate. But if he doesn't, he doesn't. And we'll find the information as best we can.
And you said to reporters after Thursday night's hearing, that clearly the president has criminal exposure. Can you fill in the context of what you think his criminal exposure is and how disappointed you will be if DOJ doesn't follow up?
Well, look, as a not lawyer, as a not prosecutor, I'm going to leave to the DOJ what reaches that threshold. I'll tell you, looking at what we've presented to the American people, if there is not criminality in that, understanding that an attempt to overthrow the government was occurring, doing nothing, behind the scene communications, some of the stuff we're seeing out of Georgia, then I don't know what is breaking the law. And I'll tell you, yes, it's very dangerous to prosecute last administrations. We don't want to get into that as a habit, but if you try a failed coup in this country and you are not prosecuted, if there is evidence, if the DOJ can reach that threshold, I think that sends, for the long-term viability of this republic, a very bad message. And it sends a roadmap to future people that want to come along and take advantage of their position as president to try to stay in power. Nobody's above the law in this country, nobody.
And I just want to circle back to the Secret Service for a moment, and with full understanding of all that they do, and I've covered the Secret Service for years with multiple presidents, but does it survive the laugh test that they would do this upgrade at that critical moment in history, then not follow multiple advisories to save everything, which is standard anyway under the Federal Records Act, and then that they would just be missing those 2 days? So is that incompetence in management, or is it something worse?
Okay, so speaking as a committee member, we'll go where the facts lead us on that. Speaking with my opinion, it doesn't pass the laugh test. I mean, it looks at, was that a department decision? Was it individual members' decision? I don't know. But it is either gross mismanagement, gross incompetence on that case, or there's something else there. We'll follow the facts on that, but I think if you just look at it on its surface, it really doesn't make a ton of sense, particularly with how, the federal government is very serious about preserving records, and especially on a day, if you're the Secret Service, like January 6th. It was probably their biggest day, frankly, since 9/11.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger, thank you very much.
The Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the Chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material presented during today's hearing. Good afternoon. When I think about the most basic way to explain the importance of elections in the United States, there's a phrase that always comes to mind. It may sound straightforward, but it's meaningful. We settle our differences at the ballot box. Sometimes my choice prevails, sometimes yours does, but it's that simple. We cast our votes, we count the votes. If something seems off with the results, we can challenge them in court, and then we accept the results. When you're on the losing side, that doesn't mean you have to be happy about it. And in the United States, there's plenty you can do and say so. You can protest, you can organize, you can get ready for the next election to try to make sure your side has a better chance the next time the people settle their differences at the ballot box. But you can't turn violent. You can't try to achieve your desired outcome through force or harassment or intimidation. Any real leader who sees their supporters going down that path, approaching that line, has a responsibility to say, stop. We gave it our best. We came up short. We try again next time because we settled our differences at the ballot box. On December 14th, 2020, the presidential election was officially over. The Electoral College had cast its vote. Joe Biden was the president-elect of the United States. By that point, many of Donald Trump's supporters were already convinced that the election had been stolen because that's what Donald Trump had been telling them. So what Donald Trump was required to do in that moment, what would have been required of any American leader, was to say, we did our best and we came up short. He went the opposite way. He seized on the anger he had already stoked among his most loyal supporters, and as they approached the line, he didn't wave them off, he urged them on. Today, the committee will explain how, as a part of his last-ditch effort to overturn the election and block the transfer of power, Donald Trump summoned a mob to Washington, D.C., and ultimately spurred that mob to wage a violent attack on our democracy. Our colleagues, Ms. Murphy of Florida and Mr. Raskin of Maryland, will lay out this story. First, I'm pleased to recognize our distinguished Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming, for any opening comments she'd care to offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Our committee did not conduct a hearing last week, but we did conduct an on-the-record interview of President Trump's former White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. If you have watched these hearings, you've heard us call for Mr. Cipollone to come forward to testify. He did, and Mr. Cipollone's testimony met our expectations. We will save for our next hearing President Trump's behavior during the violence of January 6th. Today's hearing will take us from December 14th, 2020, when the Electoral College met and certified the results of the 2020 presidential election, up through the morning of January 6th. You will see certain segments of Pat Cipollone's testimony today. We will also see today how President Trump summoned a mob to Washington and how the president's stolen election lies provoked that mob to attack the Capitol. And we will hear from a man who was induced by President Trump's lies to come to Washington and join the mob, and how that decision has changed his life. Today's hearing is our 7th. We have covered significant ground over the past several weeks, and we have also seen a change in how witnesses and lawyers in the Trump orbit approach this committee. Initially, their strategy in some cases appeared to be to deny and delay. Today, there appears to be a general recognition that the committee has established key facts, including that virtually everyone close to President Trump, his Justice Department officials, his White House advisors, his White House counsel, his campaign, all told him the 2020 election was not stolen. This appears to have changed the strategy for defending Donald Trump. Now the argument seems to be that President Trump was manipulated by others outside the administration, that he was persuaded to ignore his closest advisors, and that he was incapable of telling right from wrong. This new strategy is to try to blame only John Eastman or Sidney Powell or Congressman Scott Perry or others, and not President Trump. In this version, the president was, quote, poorly served by these outside advisors. The strategy is to blame people his advisors called, quote, the crazies for what Donald Trump did. This, of course, is nonsense. President Trump is a 76-year-old man. He is not an impressionable child. Just like everyone else in our country, he is responsible for his own actions and his own choices. As our investigation has shown, Donald Trump had access to more detailed and specific information showing that the election was not actually stolen than almost any other American. And he was told this over and over again. No rational or sane man in his position could disregard that information and reach the opposite conclusion. and Donald Trump cannot escape responsibility by being willfully blind. Nor can any argument of any kind excuse President Trump's behavior during the violent attack on January 6th. As you watch our hearing today, I would urge you to keep your eye on two specific points. First, you will see evidence that Trump's legal team, led by Rudy Giuliani, knew that they lacked actual evidence of widespread fraud sufficient to prove that the election was actually stolen. They knew it, but they went ahead with January 6th anyway. And second, consider how millions of Americans were persuaded to believe what Donald Trump's closest advisors in his administration did not. These Americans did not have access to the truth like Donald Trump did. They put their faith and their trust in Donald Trump. They wanted to believe in him. They wanted to fight for their country, and he deceived them. For millions of Americans, that may be painful to accept, but it is true. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Murphy, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, for opening statements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that then President Donald Trump lost in a free and fair election. And yet, President Trump insisted that his loss was due to fraud in the election process, rather than to the democratic will of the voters. The president continued to make this claim despite being told again and again by the courts, by the Justice Department, by his campaign officials, and by some of his closest advisors that the evidence did not support this assertion. This was the big lie, and millions of Americans were deceived by it. Too many of our fellow citizens still believe it to this day. It's corrosive to our country and damaging to our democracy. As our committee has shown in prior hearings, following the election, President Trump relentlessly pursued multiple interlocking lines of effort, all with a single goal: to remain in power despite having lost. The lines of effort were aimed at his loyal Vice President, Mike Pence, at state election and elected officials, and at the U.S. Department of Justice. The president pressured the vice president to obstruct the process to certify the election result. He demanded that state officials find him enough votes to overturn the election outcome in that state, and he pressed the Department of Justice to find widespread evidence of fraud. When justice officials told the president that such evidence did not exist, the president urged them to simply declare that the election was corrupt. On December 14th, the Electoral College met to officially confirm that Joe Biden would be the next president. The evidence shows that once this occurred, President Trump and those who were willing to aid and abet him turned their attention to the joint session of Congress scheduled for January 6th, at which the vice president would preside. In their warped view, this ceremonial event was the next, and perhaps the last, inflection point that could be used to reverse the outcome of the election before Mr. Biden's inauguration. As President Trump put it, the vice president and enough members of Congress simply needed to summon the courage to act. To help them find that courage, the president called for backup. Early in the morning of December 19th, the president sent out a tweet urging his followers to travel to Washington, D.C. for January 6th. "Be there, we'll be wild," the president wrote. As my colleague, Mr. Raskin, will describe in detail, this tweet served as a call to action, and in some cases as a call to arms for many of President Trump's most loyal supporters. It's clear the president intended the assembled crowd on the January 6th to serve his goal. And as you've already seen, and as you will see again today, some of those who are coming had specific plans. The president's goal was to stay in power for a second term despite losing the election. The assembled crowd was one of the tools to achieve that goal. And in today's hearing, we will focus on events that took place in the final weeks leading up to January 6th, starting in mid-December. And we'll add color and context to evidence you've already heard about, and we'll also provide additional new evidence. For example, you'll hear about meetings in which the president entertained extreme measures designed to help him stay in power, like the seizure of voting machines. We will show some of the coordination that occurred between the White House and members of Congress as it relates to January 6th. And some of these members of Congress would later seek pardons. We will also examine some of the planning for the January 6th protests, placing special emphasis on one rally planner's concerns about the potential violence. And we will describe some of the president's key actions on the evening of January 5th and the morning of January 6th, including how the president edited and ad-libbed his speech that morning at the Ellipse, directed the crowd to march to the Capitol, and spoke off script in a way that further inflamed an already angry crowd. I yield to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair. 4 days after the electors met across the country and made Joe Biden the president-elect, Donald Trump was still trying to find a way to hang on to the presidency. On Friday, December 18th, his team of outside advisors paid him a surprise visit in the White House that would quickly become the stuff of legend. The meeting has been called unhinged, not normal, and the craziest meeting of the Trump presidency. The outside lawyers who'd been involved in dozens of failed lawsuits had lots of theories supporting the big lie, but no evidence to support it. As we will see, however, they brought to the White House a draft executive order that they had prepared for President Trump to further his ends. Specifically, they proposed the immediate mass seizure of state election machines by the U.S. military. The meeting ended after midnight with apparent rejection of that idea. In the wee hours of December 19th, dissatisfied with his options, Donald Trump decided to call for a large and wild crowd on Wednesday, January 6th, the day when Congress would meet to certify the electoral votes. Never before in American history had a president called for a crowd to come contest the counting of electoral votes by Congress, or engaged in any effort designed to influence, delay, or obstruct the joint session of Congress in doing its work required by our Constitution and the Electoral Count Act. As we'll see, Donald Trump's 1:42 a.m. tweet electrified and galvanized his supporters, especially the dangerous extremists in the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, and other racist and white nationalist groups spoiling for a fight against the government. 3 rings of interwoven attack were now operating towards January 6th. On the inside ring, Trump continued trying to work to overturn the election by getting Mike Pence to abandon his oath of office as vice president and assert the unilateral power to reject electoral votes. This would have been a fundamental and unprecedented breach of the Constitution that would promise Trump multiple ways of staying in office. Meanwhile, in the middle ring, members of domestic violent extremist groups created an alliance, both online and in person, to coordinate a massive effort to storm, invade, and occupy the Capitol. By placing a target on the joint session of Congress, Trump had mobilized these groups around a common goal, emboldening them, strengthening their working relationships, and helping build their numbers. Finally, in the outer ring, on January 6th, there assembled a large and angry crowd, the political force that Trump considered both the touchstone and the measure of his political power. Here were thousands of enraged Trump followers, thoroughly convinced by the big lie, who traveled from across the country to join Trump's wild rally to stop the steal. With the proper incitement by political leaders and the proper instigation from the extremists, many members of this crowd could be led to storm the Capitol, confront the vice president in Congress, and try to overturn the 2020 election result. All of these efforts would converge and explode on January the 6th. Mr. Chairman, as you know better than any other member of this committee from the wrenching struggle for voting rights in your beloved Mississippi, the problem of politicians whipping up mob violence to destroy fair elections is the oldest domestic enemy of constitutional democracy in America. Abraham Lincoln knew it too. In 1837, a racist mob in Alton, Illinois, broke into the offices of an abolitionist newspaper and killed its editor, Elijah Lovejoy. Lincoln wrote a speech in which he said that no transatlantic military giant could ever crush us as a nation, even with all of the fortunes in the world. But if downfall ever comes to America, he said, we ourselves would be its author and finisher. If racist mobs are encouraged by politicians to rampage and terrorize, Lincoln said, they will violate the rights of other citizens and quickly destroy the bonds of social trust necessary for democracy to work. Mobs and demagogues will put us on a path to political tyranny, Lincoln said. As we'll see today, this very old problem has returned with new ferocity today as a president who lost an election deployed a mob which included dangerous extremists to attack the constitutional system of election and the peaceful transfer of power. And as we'll see, the creation of the internet and social media has given today's tyrants tools of propaganda and disinformation that yesterday's despots could only have dreamed of. I yield back to the gentle lady from Florida, Ms. Murphy.
Article 2 of the United States Constitution establishes the Electoral College. Each state's laws provide that electors are to be chosen by a popular vote. And on December 14th, 2020, electors met in all 50 states and the District of Columbia to cast their votes. Joseph Biden won by a margin of 306 to 232. The election was over. Mr. Biden was the president-elect. Before the Electoral College met, Donald Trump and his allies filed dozens of legal challenges to the election, but they lost over and over again, including in front of multiple judges President Trump had nominated to the bench. In many of these cases, the judges were highly critical of the arguments put forward, explaining that no genuine evidence of widespread fraud had been presented. For example, a federal judge in Pennsylvania said, "This court has been presented with strained legal arguments without merit and speculative accusations unsupported by evidence. In the United States of America, this cannot justify the disenfranchisement of a single voter, let alone all the voters of its sixth most populated state." On December 15th, after the Electoral College certified the outcome, the Republican majority leader in the Senate acknowledged Mr. Biden's victory.
Yesterday, electors met in all 50 states. So as of this morning, our country has officially a president-elect and a vice president-elect. Many millions of us had hoped the presidential election would yield a different result. But our system of government has processes to determine who will be sworn in on January the 20th. The Electoral College has spoken. So today I want to congratulate President-elect Joe Biden.
Even members of President Trump's cabinet and his White House staff understood the significance of his losses in the courts and the absence of evidence of fraud. They also respected the constitutional certification by the Electoral College. Many of them told President Trump that it was time to concede the election to Mr. Biden. For example, then Secretary of Labor Jean Scalia, an accomplished lawyer and the son of late Justice Scalia, called President Trump in mid-December and advised him to concede and accept the rulings of the courts.
And so I had to put a call into the president. I might have called on the 13th. We spoke, I believe, on the 14th, in which I conveyed to him that I thought that it was time for him to acknowledge that President Biden had prevailed in the election. But I communicated to the president that when that legal process is exhausted and when the electors have voted, that's the point at which that outcome needs to be expected. I told him that I did believe, yes, that once those legal processes were run, if fraud had not been established that had affected the outcome of the election, then unfortunately I believe that what had to be done was concede the outcome.
As you've seen in prior hearings, President Trump's Justice Department, his White House staff, and his campaign officials were repeatedly telling him that there was no evidence of fraud sufficient to change the outcome of the election. And last week, we conducted an 8-hour interview with President Trump's White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. You'll see a number of excerpts of that interview today and even more in our next hearing. Mr. Cipollone told us that he agreed with the testimony that there was no evidence of fraud sufficient to overturn the election.
I want to start by asking if you agree, Mr. Cipollone, with the conclusions of Matt Morgan and Bill Barr, of all of the individuals who evaluated those claims, that there is no evidence of election fraud sufficient to undermine the outcome in a particular state.
Yes, I agree with that.
And Mr. Cipollone also specifically testified that he believed that Donald Trump should have conceded the election.
Did you believe, Mr. Cipollone, that the president should concede once you made the determination based on the investigations that you credited DOJ did and the campaign did? Did you, in your mind, form a belief that the president should concede the election loss at a certain point after the election?
Well, again, I was the White House counsel. Some of those decisions are political. So to the extent that, but if your question is that I believe he should concede the election at a point in time, yes, I did. I believe Leader McConnell went onto the floor of the Senate, I believe in mid-December, and basically said, the process is done. That would be in line with my thinking on these things.
As Attorney General Bill Barr testified, December 14th should have been the end of the matter.
December 14th was the day that the states certified their votes and sent them to Congress. And in my view, that was the end of the matter. I didn't see, I thought that this would lead inexorably to a new administration.
Mr. Cipollone also testified that the president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, said he shared this view.
As early as that November 23rd meeting, we understand that there was discussion about the president possibly conceding the election. And specifically, we understand that Mark Meadows assured both you and Attorney General Barr that the president would eventually agree to a graceful exit. Do you remember Mr. Meadows making any such representation?
Are you saying as part of that meeting or separately? Again, without getting into that meeting, I would say that is a statement and a sentiment that I heard from Mark Meadows.
I see. And again, do you know if it was on November 23rd or some point?
Again, it was probably, around that time, and it was probably subsequent to that time. It wasn't a one-time statement.
Mr. Meadows has refused to testify, and the committee is in litigation with him. But many other White House officials shared the view that once the litigation ended and the Electoral College met, the election was over. And here's President Trump's former press secretary.
I wanted to clarify, Ms. McEnany, so back to my previous question, it was your view then, or was it your view that the efforts to overturn the election should have stopped once the litigation was complete?
In my view, upon the conclusion of litigation was when I began to plan for life after the administration.
And this is what Ivanka Trump told us.
December 14th was the day on which the Electoral College met, when these electors around the country met and cast the electoral votes consistent with the popular vote in each state. And it was obviously a public proceeding or a series of proceedings that President Biden had obtained the requisite number of electors. Was that an important day for you? Did that affect sort of your planning or your realization as to whether or not there was going to be an end of this administration?
I think so. I think it was my sentiment probably prior as well.
Judd Deere was a White House deputy press secretary. This was his testimony about what he told President Trump.
I told him that my personal viewpoint was that the Electoral College had met, which is the system that our country is set under to elect a president and vice president. And I believed at that point that the means for him to pursue litigation was probably closed.
And you recall what his response, if any, was?
He disagreed.
We've also seen this testimony from Attorney General Barr reflecting a view of the White House staff in late November 2020.
And then at that point, I left. And as I walked out of the Oval Office, Jared was there with Dan Scavino, who ran the president's social media, and who I thought was a reasonable guy and believe is a reasonable guy. And I said, how long is he going to carry on with this stolen election stuff? Where's this going to go? And by that time, Meadows had caught up with me and leaving the office and caught up to me and said that he said, look, I think that he's becoming more realistic and knows that there's a limit to how far he can take this. And then Jared said, yeah, we're working on this. We're working on it.
Likewise, in this testimony, Cassidy Hutchinson, an aide to Mark Meadows, described her conversations with President Trump's Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, a former Republican congressman.
He had expressed to me that he was concerned that it could spiral out of control and potentially be dangerous, either for our democracy or the way that things were going for the 6th.
Of course, underlying all of this is the fundamental principle that the President of the United States cannot simply disregard the rulings of state and federal courts, which are empowered to address specific election-related claims. The President cannot simply pretend that the courts had not ruled.
By that time, the President or his associates had lost 60 out of 61 cases that they had brought to challenge different aspects of the election in a number of states. They lost 60 out of 61 of those cases. So by the time we get to January 3rd, that's been clear. I assume, Pat, that you would agree the president is obligated to abide by the rulings of the courts.
Of course.
And I assume you also would...
Everybody is obligated to abide by rules, of course.
And I assume you also would agree the president has a particular obligation to take care that the laws be faithfully executed.
That is one of the president's obligations, correct.
Yet President Trump disregarded these court rulings and the counsel from his closest advisors and continued his efforts to cling to power. In our prior hearings, you have heard considerable testimony about President Trump's attempts to corruptly pressure Vice President Pence to refuse to count electoral votes, to corrupt the Department of Justice, to pressure state officials and state legislatures, and to create and submit a series of fake electoral slates. Now, we will show you what other actions President Trump was taking between December 14th, 2020 and January 6th. I yield to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Throughout our hearings, you've heard how President Trump made baseless claims that voting machines were being manipulated by foreign powers in the 2020 election. You've also heard Trump's Attorney General, Bill Barr, describe such claims as complete nonsense, which he told the president. Let's review that testimony.
I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations, but they were made in such a sensational way that they obviously were influencing a lot of people, members of the public, that there was this systemic corruption in the system and that their votes didn't count and that these machines controlled by somebody else were actually determining it, which was complete nonsense. And it was being laid out there. And I told them that it was crazy stuff and they were wasting their time on that. And it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
We've learned that President Trump's White House counsel agreed with the Department of Justice about this.
Attorney General Barr made a public announcement on December 1st, less than a month after the election, that he had seen no suspended fraud sufficient. Fair to say that by December 1st, you had reached the same conclusion?
It's fair to say that I agree with Attorney General Barr's conclusion on December 1st. Yes, I did, and I supported that conclusion.
However, the strong rejection of the Attorney General and the White House counsel of these claims did not stop the president from trying to press them in public. But that's not all he did. Indeed, as you'll see in this clip, the president asked Attorney General Bill Barr to have the Department of Justice seize voting machines in the states.
My recollection is the president said something like, well, we could get to the bottom, some people say we could get to the bottom of this if the department seized the machines. It was a typical way of raising a point. And I said, absolutely not. There's no probable cause, and I'm not going to seize any machines. And that was that. Yeah.
But this wasn't the end of the matter. On the evening of December 18th, 2020, Sidney Powell, General Michael Flynn, and others entered the White House for an unplanned meeting with the president, the meeting that would last multiple hours and become hot-blooded and contentious. The executive order behind me on the screen was drafted on December the 16th, just 2 days after the Electoral College vote, by several of the president's outside advisors over a luncheon at the Trump International Hotel. As you can see here, this proposed order directs the Secretary of Defense to seize voting machines, quote, effective immediately, but it goes even further than that. Under the order, President Trump would appoint a special counsel with the power to seize machines and then charge people with crimes with all resources necessary to carry out her duties. The specific plan was to name Sidney Powell as special counsel, the Trump lawyer who had spent the post-election period making outlandish claims about Venezuelan and Chinese interference in the election, among others. Here's what White House counsel Pat Cipollone had to say about Sidney Powell's qualifications to take on such expansive authority.
I don't think Sidney Powell would say that I thought it was a good idea to appoint her special counsel. I was vehemently opposed. I didn't think she should be appointed to anything.
Sidney Powell told the president that these steps were justified because of her evidence of foreign interference in the 2020 election. However, as we've seen, Trump's allies had no such evidence and, of course, no legal authority for the federal government to seize state voting machines. Here's Mr. Cipollone again denouncing Sidney Powell's terrible idea.
There was a real question in my mind and a real concern, particularly after the Attorney General had reached the conclusion that there wasn't sufficient election fraud to change the outcome of the election. When other people kept suggesting that there was, the answer is, what is it? And at some point, you'd have to put up or shut up. That was my view.
Why was this, on a broader scale, a bad idea for the country?
To have the federal government seize voting machines, it's a terrible idea for the country. That's not how we do things in the United States. There's no legal authority to do that. And there is a way to contest elections, that happens all the time. But the idea that the federal government could come in and seize election machines, I don't understand why I would even have to tell you why that's a bad idea for the country. It's a terrible idea.
For all of its absurdity, the December 18th meeting was critically important because President Trump got to watch up close for several hours as his White House counsel and other White House lawyers destroyed the baseless factual claims and ridiculous legal arguments being offered by Sidney Powell, Mike Flynn, and others. President Trump now knew all these claims were nonsense, not just from his able White House lawyers, but also from his own Department of Justice officials and indeed his own campaign officials. As White House counsel Pat Cipollone told us,
with respect to the whole election fraud issue, to me, it's sort of, if you're going to make those kind of claims, and people were open to them early on because people were making all sorts of claims, and the real question is, show the evidence, okay?
It wasn't just the Justice Department, the Trump campaign, and the Trump White House lawyers who knew it. Even Rudy Giuliani's own legal team admitted that they did not have any real evidence of fraud sufficient to change the election result. Here's an email from Rudy Giuliani's lead investigator, Bernie Kerik, on December 28, 2020, to Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. Mr. Kerik did not mince any words. We can do all the investigations we want later, but if the president plans on winning, it's the legislators that have to be moved, and this will do just that. Mr. Kerik wanted the president to win. What he didn't say in this email was what he would later tell the Select Committee in a letter that his lawyer wrote to us in November. The letter said, quote, "It was impossible for Mr. Kerik and his team to determine conclusively whether there was widespread fraud or whether that widespread fraud would have altered the outcome of the election." In other words, even Rudy Giuliani's own legal team knew before January 6th that they hadn't collected enough actual evidence to support any of their stolen election claims. Here's what Trump campaign senior advisor Jason Miller told the committee about some of the so-called evidence of fraud that the campaign had seen from the Giuliani team.
So do you know what the examples of fraud, numbers, names, and supporting evidence was that you sent to Mo Brooks's office? And when I say you, I mean you or the campaign.
There are some very, very general documents as far as say, for example, here are the handful of dead people in several different states. Here are explanations on a couple of the legal challenges as far as saying that the rules were changed in an unconstitutional manner. But it was, to say that it was thin is probably an understatement.
Here's how President Trump's deputy campaign manager described the evidence of fraud that the campaign had seen.
You never came to learn or understand that Mayor Giuliani had produced evidence of election fraud. Is that fair?
That's fair.
And here's testimony that we received from the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives, Rusty Bowers, about an exchange that he had with Rudy Giuliani after the election.
At some point, did one of them make a comment that they didn't have evidence, but they had a lot of theories?
That was Mr. Giuliani.
Chief of Staff Mark Meadows told people that he thought Trump should concede around the time the Electoral College certified the result. But nonetheless, he later worked to try to facilitate President Trump's wishes. Here's what Cassidy Hutchinson told us.
During this period, I perceived his goal with all of this to keep Trump in office. He had very seriously and deeply considered the allegations of voter fraud. But when he began acknowledging that maybe there wasn't enough voter fraud to overturn the election, I witnessed him start to explore potential constitutional loopholes more extensively, which I then connected with John Eastman's theories.
The startling conclusion is this: even an agreed upon complete lack of evidence could not stop President Trump, Mark Meadows, and their allies from trying to overturn the results of a free and fair election. So let's return to that meeting at the White House on the evening of December 18. That night, a group showed up at the White House, including Sidney Powell, retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, and former Overstock.com CEO Patrick Byrne. After gaining access to the building from a junior White House staffer, the group made their way to the Oval Office. They were able to speak with the president by himself for some time until White House officials learned of the meeting. What ensued was a heated and profane clash between this group and President Trump's White House advisors, who traded personal insults, accusations of disloyalty to the president, and even challenges to physically fight. The meeting would last over 6 hours, beginning here in the Oval Office, moving around the West Wing, and many hours later, ending up in the president's private residence. The Select Committee has spoken with 6 of the participants, as well as staffers who could hear the screaming from outside the Oval Office. What took place next is best told in their own words, as you will see from this video.
Did you believe that it was going to work, that you were going to be able to get to see the president without an appointment?
I had no idea.
In fact, you did get to see the president without an appointment.
We did.
How much time did you have alone with the president? And I say alone, you had other people with you, but from his aides before the crowd came running?
Probably no more than 10 or 15 minutes.
Was in that...
I bet Pat Cipollone set a new land speed record.
I got a call either from Molly or Hirschman that I need to get to the Oval Office.
So that was the first point that I had recognized. Okay, there was nobody in there from the White House. Mark's gone. What's going on right now?
I opened the door and I walked in. I saw General Flynn. I saw Sidney Powell sitting there. I was not happy to see the people in the Oval Office.
Explain why.
Well, again, I don't think they were providing. Well, first of all, the overstock person, I've never knew who this guy was. Actually, the first thing I did, I walked in, I looked at him, and I said, "Who are you?" And he told me. I don't think any of these people were providing the president with good advice, and so I didn't understand how they had gotten in.
In the short period of time that you had with the president, did he seem receptive to the presentation that you were making?
He was very interested in hearing particularly about the CISA finding and the terms of 13848 that apparently nobody else had bothered to inform him of.
I was asking, like, you claim the Democrats were working with Yugoslavs, Venezuelans, and whomever else. And at one point, General Flynn took out a diagram that supposedly showed IP addresses all over the world, and who was communicating with whom via the machines, and some comment about like Nest thermostats being hooked up to the internet.
So it's been reported that during this meeting, Ms. Powell talked about Dominion voting machines and made various election fraud claims that involve foreign countries such as Venezuela, Iran, and China. Is that accurate?
Sure.
Was the meeting tense?
Oh, yeah. It was not a casual meeting.
Explain.
I mean, at times there were people shouting at each other, hurling insults at each other. It wasn't just sort of people sitting around on a couch, like chit-chatting.
Do you recall whether he raised to Ms. Powell the fact that she and the campaign had lost all of the 60 cases that they had brought in litigation?
Yes, he raised that.
And what was the response?
I don't remember what she said. I don't think it was a good response.
Cipollone and Hirschman and whoever the other guy was showed nothing but contempt and disdain of the president.
Yeah, I remember the three of them were really sort of forcefully attacking me verbally. Derek, and we were pushing back, and we were asking one simple question as a general matter: where is the evidence? So,
what response did you get when you asked Ms. Powell and her colleagues, where's the evidence?
A variety of responses based on my current recollection, including, can't believe you would say something like, things like this, like, what do you mean, where's the evidence? You should know, and things like that, or, a disregard, I would say, a general disregard for the importance of actually backing up what you say with facts.
And, then there was discussion of, well, we don't have it now, but we will have it or whatever.
I mean, if it had been me sitting in his chair, I would have fired all of them that night and had them escorted out of the building.
But Derek and I both challenged what she was saying. And She says, well, the judges are corrupt. And I was like, everyone? Every single case that you've done in the country you guys lost, every one of them is corrupt, even the ones we appointed? And I'm being nice. That was much more harsh to her.
So one of the other things that's been reported that was said during this meeting was that President Trump told White House lawyers, Mr. Hirschman and Mr. Cipollone, that they weren't offering him any solutions, but Ms. Powell and others were. So why not try what Ms. Powell and others were proposing? Do you remember anything along those lines being said by President Trump?
I do. That sounds right.
I think that it got to the point where the screaming was completely out there. I mean, you got people walk in, it was late at night, it had been a long day, and what they were proposing, I thought was nuts.
I'm gonna categorically describe it as, you guys are not tough enough. Or maybe I put it another way, you're a bunch of pussies. Excuse the expression, but I'm almost certain the word was used.
Flynn screamed at me that I was a quitter and everything, kept on standing up and turning around and screaming at me. And at a certain point I had it with him. So I yelled back. Either come over or sit your effing ass back down.
The president and the White House team went upstairs to the residence, but to the public part of the residence, the big parlor where you can have meetings in the conference room.
Oval. They call it the yellow oval?
Yes, exactly, the yellow oval office. I always called it the upper. And I'm not exactly sure where the Sydney group went. I think maybe the Roosevelt room. And I stayed in the cabinet room, which is kind of cool. I really like that. All by myself.
At the end of the day, we landed where we started the meeting, at least from a structural standpoint, which was Sidney Powell was fighting, Mike Flynn was fighting. They were looking for avenues that would result in President Trump remaining President Trump for a second term.
The meeting finally ended after midnight. Here are text messages sent by Cassidy Hutchinson during and after the meeting. As you can see, Ms. Hutchinson reported that the meeting in the West Wing was unhinged. The meeting finally broke up after midnight. During the early morning of December 19, Cassidy Hutchinson captured the moment of Mark Meadows escorting Rudy Giuliani off the White House grounds to, quote, make sure he didn't wander back into the mansion. Certain accounts of this meeting indicate that President Trump actually granted Ms. Powell's security clearance and appointed her to a somewhat ill-defined position of special counsel.
He asked Pat Cipollone if he had the authority to name me special counsel, and he said yes. And then he asked him if he had the authority to give me whatever security clearance I needed, and Pat Cipollone said yes. And then the president said, okay, I'm naming her that, and I'm giving her security clearance. And then shortly before we left, and it totally blew up, was when Cipollone and or Hirschman and whoever the other young man was said, you can name her whatever you want to name her, and no one's going to pay any attention to it.
How did he respond? How did the president respond to that?
Something like, you see what I deal with this all the time.
Over the ensuing days, no further steps were taken to appoint Sidney Powell, but there is some ambiguity about what the president actually said and did during the meeting. Here is how Pat Cipollone described it.
I don't know what her understanding of whether she had been appointed, what she had been appointed to. Okay. In my view, she hadn't been appointed to anything and ultimately wasn't appointed to anything because there had to be other steps taken. So that was my view when I left the meeting, but she may have a different view and others may have a different view and the president may have a different view.
Were any steps taken, including the president himself, telling her she'd been appointed?
Again, I'm not going to get into what the president said in the meeting. my recollection is you're not appointed till steps are taken to get the paperwork done. And when I left the meeting, okay, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not going to get into what the president said or say he wanted.
Mr. Cipollone, when the matter continued to flare up over the next several days, was it your understanding that Sidney Powell was still seeking an appointment, or that she was asserting that she had been appointed by the president at the December 18 meeting?
You know, now that you mentioned it, probably both. You know, in terms of I think she may have been of the view that she had been appointed and was seeking to, get that done, and that she should be appointed.
As you listen to these clips, remember that Ms. Powell, the person who President Trump tried to make special counsel, was ultimately sanctioned by a federal court and sued by Dominion Voting Systems for defamation. In her own defense to that lawsuit, Sidney Powell argued that, quote, no reasonable person would conclude that the statements were truly statements of fact. Not long after Sidney Powell, General Flynn, and Rudy Giuliani left the White House in the early hours of the morning, President Trump turned